Hi there, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Alpine Stories. It's lovely to have everybody here tonight, and we're really excited and sad at the same time. This is the last in our weekly series, so I'm sure some of you have been with us over the last 10 weeks, and we have been everywhere. We've been to Patagonia, we've been to Greenland, we've been all over the Alps numerous times, we've been to Canada, and we've heard all about some really inspiring alpine stories from different instructors and also members. It's been a fantastic 10 weeks. And we've saved a fantastic one till last. As I'm sure some of you are aware, we were planning to be in person in the Dolomites this summer to have a rock climbing and alpine summer meet there, but unfortunately, for obvious reasons, we've had to cancel that and postpone it until next year. So please do check us out and find out that we'll find out more details about 2021. But in the meantime, we've got Tania Noakes, who's a fabulous mountain guide and a good friend, and she's going to talk to us about her she knows the Dolomites really well. She's going to talk to us about her Classic Climbs Challenge and some of the wonders that await in the Dolomites. But I'll let Jenny introduce Tania. So just to say welcome to everybody. And before we start, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an intro about who we are and also some housekeeping. So we are a community project of women, run by women, supported by women, and really what we're about is supporting each other to develop our alpine skills so that we're safer in the mountains and we achieve the goals and objectives we want to, and meet future adventure buddies, and most importantly to have those alpine adventures with. So we have summer and winter meets where, as I said, we develop skills through workshops with guides, through instruction, and also through sharing skills of more experienced members. And we do everything from rock climbing, from alpine skills like crevasse rescue, to hiking, navigation in summer. I mentioned climbing, and then winter, same deal, but with snow involved. So we do ice climbing, we do winter mountaineering, we do ski touring, avalanche awareness. So everything we could possibly need to skill up in the mountains. So do please check us out and support us. Also, we have a website where you'll find things like these Alpine Stories. So we've got an excellent content now. So if you've missed any talks and it's a rainy day, please do go to the website and check those out. And we're also growing the website content. So we've got favourite alpine routes. So if you want to see what some of the guides and also some of our members have nominated as some of their favourites, there's some really good instructions there about how to go about some of those routes and where they are. Do check those out. So online is the place to be as well. So that's it about who we are, and then a little bit about housekeeping during the presentation. So you may have noticed we've muted all your mics and your videos just as you enter, and that's so that it's not distracting for the speaker. Ourselves, Jenny and Lizzie, will keep our videos on throughout the call, just so that Tanya doesn't feel she's like in a black box speaking to nobody. But of course, we will allow you to come off mute and to hopefully see your face if you want us to when we have questions and answers at the end. We'll allow plenty of time for you guys to have a chat with Tanya and ask questions. And Jenny will explain how you can raise your hand. Also, if you're shy or you don't want to, it's not appropriate for you to come off mute, or you don't want to share video, then that's absolutely fine. We totally understand. You can put your question in the chat and we'll make sure that we direct it to Tanya and she can answer it for you. And finally, just to say that we are live on Facebook so that people can watch us through that channel as well. And also we'll be making all of this content publicly available on our website so that people can catch up if they haven't had the opportunity to view it firsthand. So just be aware. I'm sure nobody will swear, but the event information is public. That's it. So I'm going to hand over to Jenny, who's going to talk to us about Tania, and then we can speak to Tania herself.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Louise. Yeah, thrilled to have you all here again tonight. I can't believe that it's been 10 weeks we've been doing this, and it's been great having you all along the way. So thank you for joining us again tonight. Her favourite places in Europe are the Dolomites and Sardinia, and so Tania is joining us from Sardinia tonight, where she's spending the summer, and you can hear a little bit more about what she's up to in Sardinia later on as well. So Tania, do you want to join us by turning on your video and mic, and we'll carry on with your talk. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello.
Good. You can hear me?
Yes, we can, and see you. It's a good start.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So is this where, Lizzie, you hand over control to me, or I get the thumbs up? Excellent. I am in Sardinia right now, and today it's been 34 degrees, which is testing my heat coping mechanism. So if I look a bit shiny and red, then that's the explanation. So I'm sitting in a kind of cool, darkened room at the moment after a cold shower. Hopefully the presentation will go okay. Right, so do I have control? Oh, I have control. Right, moving on then. Oh, not moving on. I don't have control. Ah, okay, maybe that was Lizzie, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, tonight I'm really looking forward to telling you a little bit about the Dolomites in Italy. The Dolomites is an area of mountains in the northeast, upper northeast area of Italy. And over the years, it's become a very, very special place to me, as Jenny made out. My two favourite places in Europe are the Dolomites and Sardinia. But I've got a much longer history with Sardinia, with the Dolomites, than I do with Sardinia. And this picture that you're looking at now is called the Agordino Heart. And it's a naturally formed hole in a ridgeline overlooking the San Locarno Valley, which is in the southwest part of the Dolomites. And it's actually locally known as the Yosemite of the Dolomites because there are 1,000-meter faces on either side of this valley, and you can wander up a beautiful little scramble to see this height, this heart on the ridgeline, and look down on the San Locarno Valley. The scramble up to the heart, it's a little bit of walking and a few short exposed scrambly sections, but no real climbing and no real technical terrain requiring the rope. So it's an accessible walk for most competent people. And the peak that you can see in the background, I don't know whether I can use the cursor to identify it. This peak here, this is called Montagnier, and we'll hear about Montagnier later on in the talk because it is one of my favorite mountains in the Dolomites. And the ridge descending from the summit of Montagnier down here is the North Ridge of Montagnier, and it's 1,500 meters of limestone climbing up to grade 5, UIAA grade 5 plus. And so there's some very, very long routes in the Dolomites, and actually that's one of the things that attracted me there in the first place. So my first visit to the Dolomites was in 2005. So I was, well, how old was I? I was just turned 30 in 2005, or just before 30. I can't remember that. So long time ago. And although I didn't climb this specific route on my first visit, I had a week there with a friend and we climbed a handful of routes, and I saw this one and I wanted to go back and climb it. And this is the Cime Grande and the Camici route on the north face of the Cime Grande, and it has some hard pitches at the base, but then gets a little bit easier higher up. And one of the reasons why I've put this photograph in is because it's one of the 6 north faces of the Alps that everyone's heard of, but it's one of 2 that are rock based. But as you can see in this picture, we climbed it when the first snows of winter had already gone on the ground. So there's a little bit of snow on that approach ledge, and you have to approach underneath the wall. It's a very sheer wall with snow as well. And although I didn't climb this on my first visit, we climbed a handful of routes and looked at this, and I knew I wanted to come back and do it. During that first week of climbing, I also, I knew I liked the style of climbing, the atmosphere of the place, and we'd had a mixture of success and failure, but I knew that I wanted to return. So I bought 2 guidebooks, which we'll hear about later, because at the time in 2005, there weren't really that many guidebooks in English. Now there are a lot more guidebooks in English. Perhaps later on you might want to ask questions about them. There are some produced by British companies and some produced by Italian companies and translated into English. But in 2005, there really wasn't that choice. So I bought a kind of a pamphlet of local sport climbing routes and a book called The Classic Climbs of the Dolomites, which I'll come on to later. At the end of that first week, though, that I was hooked, and a couple of years later, I got the opportunity to come back and climb this route with a friend who had actually been climbing and working, doing a week of climbing with some students in the Brenta Dolomites, which is a little bit further west. And at the end of that trip, we finished work and we had one day off, and the students went to swim in Lake Garda, and myself and the other instructor seized our opportunity, drove across, got quite late at the car park, bivouacked, and then came in to climb the Kamichi route. And so we weren't really going to let a little bit of snow put us off, and neither did it. However, higher up on the route, the route is so steep that it doesn't really hold any snow. You can climb it even when there's a light dusting, and many people do. Because it's so steep, none of the snow sticks on the harder climbing. However, higher up, there was significant amounts of snow on the easier terrain, and then there's a traversing ledge at about 2/3 height that you escape from for the descent route on the south face, and that too had significant snow. So all in all, that climb was a little bit of an adventure for us. And I remember, I mean, it's a very good climbing friend of mine who's since gone on to work with Cicerone Press, the guidebook publishing company in the UK, and we still stay in touch and still do climbs together. But for us, it was a real adventure, and it was before I became qualified as a guide. In fact, probably 5 years before I entered the scheme. So this was one of a real adventure climb for me. So after that, I was well and truly hooked on the Dolomites. And I thought, rather than just launch into talking about a series of different climbs, I tried to share with you what makes the Dolomites so very special from my perspective. Now, obviously, every one of us will have our own perspective on what we like and what we don't like in terms of climbing and mountaineering. But something within the Dolomites has obviously really hooked me. And so I'm going to share the things that I view that make the Dolomites very special. This picture here is of the Brenta Dolomites, which is an outlying massif of the Dolomites in the west of the Trentino Valley. And if I move the cursor again, here you can see the Crozon di Brenta, and it's an incredible mountain. And this is seen from the road near Madonna di Campiglio, a very famous ski area. And you can see that here the rock has a series of sort of horizontal fault lines, very clearly marked. It's obviously a sedimentary rock, and it's absolutely correct. It's a sedimentary rock, and it's a unique sedimentary rock. So one of the things that makes it so special and that it's very interesting, this whole area, is its unique geology. So this Brenta Massif, which is on the west side of the Trentino Valley, is a little bit of an outlying area. The rest of the Dolomites are to the east of the Trentino Valley, but they lie in a series of isolated limestone upland areas. And how did they form? Well, they're very famous because they're fossilized coral reefs. And they were formed in the Triassic period, which is about 250 million years ago, by organisms and sedimentary matter at the bottom of an ancient tropical ocean called the Tethys Ocean. Now, I'm going to summarize the plate tectonics. So basically, there was this big shallow ocean called the Tethys Ocean that was between the European plate and the African plate. And the plates began to move and they began to pull apart, and the ocean got deeper. And as it got deeper, the coral reefs sunk, and the organisms which made the coral reefs had to grow upwards to stay close to the warm, shallow areas. So basically, they accelerated their growth upwards as the bottom of the sea, which was a granite bedrock, began to sink, and that accelerated. And they grew up to over 1,000 meters high, all of these massive coral reefs. And then the plate tectonics changed, and the ocean began to close as the African plate got a little bit closer to Europe, began to close, and the western part of the Tethys Ocean actually completely closed. And then the period of mountain building that formed the Alps started to happen. And at that point, these big coral reefs that had been 1,000 meters deep in the Tethys Ocean were pushed up above into dry land, and now these mountains are up to 3,500 meters. So the Marmolada is 3,500 meters. And you may be surprised to learn that there are 86 summits in the Dolomites over 3,000 meters. It's an incredible number of individual 3,000 meter summits, and we'll get onto that interesting figure a little bit later in the talk as well. So this geology is fascinating. The base rocks are granite. These unique coral reefs, now fossilized and into mountains, they're made by a very, very special mineral. And the first person to discover this mineral, or to isolate it and name it, was a French mineralogist called Diodat Gartet de Dolomieu in the 18th century. I probably pronounced his name terribly, but focus on the last bit of the name, the Dolomieu, because dolomite, the name of the rock, was named after him. And he was the first to describe the mineral, and the mineral is unique to this area. So there isn't any other rock in the world that has this mineral content. Similar, but not quite the same. And so a number of years ago, UNESCO decided to declare this entire area UNESCO World Heritage Property for its geological, for its unique geological status. If you want to look in more, there's an awful lot more information out there, but that gives you a very succinct impression about the geology of the area. And I think it's incredible because you can be walking across these vast rocky upland plateaus at the top of some of these summits, particularly the Sella Massif or the Sassolungo, and you're effectively walking along the base of an ancient ocean. And it's not unusual to come across fossils. And all of these fault lines, because it's a sedimentary rock, these fault lines create the opportunity to have incredible climbing traverses on vertical cliff faces. So it's actually absolutely stunning. This slide hopefully gives you it's a little bit out of focus on my computer. Hopefully everybody can see it a little bit clearly, but I'm going to use my cursor to move around and show you the red areas are these ancient coral reefs that are now the Dolomite Mountains. So this place out here is what this is the Brenta Dolomites. Okay, this is, I think this Dolomites de Brenta, yeah. So you can see that it's a little bit separated from the rest. Okay, and then we're going to come up here, and this is where's this? It's all a little bit blurred, unfortunately. Sassolungo, I think, is here. I could be pointing to completely Sassolungo. Trecime should be around here. This should be the Sorapis group. And then Pelmo should be kind of around here in the middle. And then we're looking at the San Martino di Castrosa down here. Yeah? Oh, I'm getting some nodded heads. That's great. It's totally blurred on my screen, so I'm going by memory. But it gives you an idea about where all of these places are, okay? Interestingly enough, if we refer to the new UK Rock Facts Guide, it kind of covers this area of the Dolomites. And it says all the Dolomite climbs in one book. And it kind of describes the one in this bit here. You can see that it actually describes about a third of the Dolomites. Yeah. And it doesn't go anywhere down here. This place doesn't exist in the book. Yeah. So I initially thought that the author was setting himself up to do a second book. However, I've since learned that no, he just hasn't climbed in any of the other bits of the area. Anyway, moving on. So that gives you an idea of where all the places that I'm talking about are. And what else is there to love about the Dolomites? Well, some of you may have heard that the rock quality can be a little bit loose. And that's why I've put this slide in, because this rock was definitely a little bit loose. This is actually, this wasn't a climb that I did. This was a an exposed scramble to do one of the 3,000-meter summits that I want to do. So this is a 3,000-meter summit called Contourines. I think it's the West Contourine or East Contourine. And I didn't want to lose too much height traversing around from another peak, East Contourine. So I kind of scrambled along this ridge, and it's a recognized and described scramble. However, it is exceptionally exposed, and the rock is a bit like petrified Weetabix. So rock quality, loose. Yes, there are places in the Dolomites that you can go to if you are that way inclined and experience really quite shitty rock. However, I think the Dolomites has a really unfair reputation because it doesn't have to be like that. This is on the south face of the Moiazza, further down in the south of the Dolomites near the Pala di San Martino, and this is as solid as rock gets. It's beautiful plate, water hardened plate limestone with massive holes, really big threads where you can put slings and bits of Kevlar through to create protection, and really steep and littered with holes, and nothing moves, and it's perfect. Exceptional climbing and totally solid. So in the Dolomites, there's some loose rock, yeah, and you've got to be aware of it, but you don't have to climb on loose rock. It can be very solid. And I think some of the people that have had bad experiences in the Dolomites have just not really known where to go to find the solid rock. And they've perhaps found themselves on something that they think is a little bit of a horror fest. And then they've labeled the whole of the Dolomites. Oh, I had a terrible experience. It was really loose. And then they never go back. And they actually find, oh yeah, that climb's known for being a bit loose. Maybe you shouldn't have done it, you know? So local knowledge is actually quite useful there. So the other thing that makes the Dolomites really special, and we're going to go into a little kind of side alley here, unfortunately. Now, some of you may know that I spent some time in the British Army. I have an interest in, what you may not know is that I have an interest in military history, and the history of this area around the First World War is fascinating because the front line of the First World War went right through the Dolomites. So before the First World War, this is the modern front line. This is the modern frontier between Austria and Italy. Border, they call it, don't they? Not frontier or border. Sorry, because I'm trying to learn Italian, I'm losing some of my English words, so please sympathize, give me some sympathy. So this is the border, the current day border between Austria and Italy. However, you will notice that this whole chunk here of Trentino and Südtirol, otherwise known as Alta Adige, I'm probably pronouncing it very badly again. This was all part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So the First World War was pivotal in changing the boundaries within this region. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a kind of summary of how that happened. So you'll see that, does that say Tafana de Roses? I can't, yeah, oh, winner, because it doesn't say it on my screen, which is a little bit worrying. And Trentino, Bolzano. Okay, perfect. So before the First World War, Austro-Hungary owned or ran Trentino and South Tyrol, the Alta Adige. However, the newly formed nation of Italy, because Italy had gone in through its formation in the previous 100 years, had its eye on all of the terrain up to the frontier. Even though Trentino had a mix of Italian and German speakers, Alta Adige was primarily German and Lardin speaking. Lardin is another Latin-based language, but very different from both German and Italian. So there were big areas here that Italy was coveting. It really wanted to get these areas from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire was beginning to, its power was beginning to wane. So obviously, First World War broke out with France and the UK on the Allied side, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany on the other side. Okay, and most of us think about, when we think about the First World War, we think about the trenches in Normandy and Brittany and the fight that was going on there. But there was actually a front line down here, but it didn't happen initially because Italy very cautiously didn't enter the war until a year into the war. It waited. And it waited because it didn't really have any kind of, other than coveting these provinces, it didn't really have any gripe, and it didn't really want to join the Allies. It had no reason to. So it waited, and then a year in, it secretly negotiated with France and the UK that if it joined on the Allied side, then at the end of the war, the Allies would give them these two provinces. So it was an incentive for Italy to come into the war on the Allied side, which they did. However, because they had a year, Austro-Hungary kind of knew what was going on. They weren't politically out in the woods, you know, they had their finger on the pulse, and they knew that Italy wanted these places. So they had a year for their troops to retreat to the high ground and the coals and to find very good defensive positions and to dig in. And so after a year, the Austro-Hungarian troops, which were mostly young boys and older men, because the men of the fighting age had gone off to fight on the Prussian front. So the youngsters and the old guys, they were all in their trenches on mountain tops at the top of Tofana de Roses, the Lagazzoi, and lots of coals, and Col de Lana, very famous for some battles there. And the front line went all the way over Marmolada, the highest peak, went through the glacier over the peaks and then down. And then the most of the major fighting was in this area. And through the main Dolomite chain, it was actually fairly static, although there were some incredibly and incredibly daring and, I would say reckless, incredibly inspirational and daring attacks and defensive action that actually didn't change the front that much because it was such a static war in this area. And then up here in the Adamello and the Brenta, there was also a front line that went through the Brenta Dolomites and the Adamello. There's actually an old World War I cannon up on the glacier at 3,000 meters that you can ski tour to, which is really interesting up in Adamello. But there wasn't that much fighting up there because they were all a bit worried about lobbing things over into neutral Switzerland, yeah? So they kind of kept it chill up in this area because they didn't want to bring piss Switzerland off, yeah? So here it was a bit static with some daring raids. Here, a bit quiet, you know, they kept their neighbour nice and happy. And here, a lot of major fighting happened, okay? I am getting sucked into the history, but it's very, very interesting. And you should, if you go there, you've definitely got to understand some of it. So the Italians didn't, thankfully I've got the door closed and none of my Italian friends can hear this, but they didn't fight very well, unfortunately. So they lost the war. Well, obviously they didn't lose the war in general, but they had a major defeat at Caporetto and they couldn't hold the front line, and therefore they had to retreat way, way, way south. Where's Piave? It's kind of like, I think one of these rivers is called the Piave. Anyway, they lost this whole section. They had to retreat, you know, like drop their weapons, run away. There were lots of desertees all the way. And Caporetto is still known to Italians to signify an incredibly a profound defeat, okay? However, the Allies didn't want this front line to collapse, so they reinforced with extra Allied troops. And because the war was going better on the fronts up in Normandy and Brittany, they were able to redirect troops. The front line in the east with Russia, that would close down. So basically things changed, and the Allies reinforced, and the Allies won the war. And to cut a long story short, although Italy lost their little bit of the war, they then stabilized, and then they got these Trentino and Alto Adige from Austro-Hungary at the end of the war. So when you look at the map of Austria, you've got Südtirol here and West Tyrol here, and in here is, East Tyrol and West Tyrol, and no, West Tyrol and East Tyrol, sorry. And this bit here, South Tyrol, is missing. It's the only state in Austria that has a big chunk missing from it, yeah? And I probably should move on to the climbing, but I'll just say one more thing. I worked with a good friend of mine who was I guess a colonel in the Austrian army. Oh gosh, no, this is going live. No, I won't do that because that's will be recording. We'll move on. Okay, so there's loads and loads of history of the First World War left there. And I was told to put a little bit of information about what these things were rather than just tunnels and trenches because so here is an incredible Strada della Cinque Due Galleria, and it's near Monte Presubio. Now, Monte Presubio was a hellish mountain. Reading some of the accounts of people that fought up there on both sides, it unbelievable what they had to go through, and not just kind of live through, but then actually try and fight each other as well. And the Italian position, what happened in this particular area, the Italian position, its resupply lines fell so that they were easily observed by the Austro-Hungarians. And so they were vulnerable to direct line of fire. So the Italians then had to come up with a better way of resupplying their positions that wasn't in the direct line of fire of the Austro-Hungarians. And they came up with this ingenious solution of tunneling up through the ridgeline and coming out occasionally from the ridgeline on the safe side, and then going back, plunging back into the ridgeline, and then doing kind of spirals up through little pinnacles, and then coming back out on the safe side. So this tunnel, which is about 8 kilometers long to supply this position, which was deemed obviously quite an important position, has 52 galleries, and you can walk along this. It's not exposed or anything. You can walk along it, families walk along it, but it is incredible because you go into one of these tunnels and spiral upwards, and then you come out and you've got a completely different view, and you go along a bit and then you're back into another tunnel, and the engineer is such an incredible feat of military engineering. Now, military engineering isn't really something that floats my boat. However, I could totally understand how military engineers would get really excited about this, because it's a really exciting thing. So there's loads of tunnels, and they also did tunneling up in Lagazoy Mountain, not just for resupplying, but also for blowing troops off the mountain. So there's a big tunnel that you can explore in the Lagazoy Mountain that was a mining tunnel. And they had some Austro-Hungarian troops on the top, and the Italians decided the Italians were on the middle ledge, and the Austro-Hungarians would lob bombs down onto the middle ledge to them, and obviously they couldn't dislodge them up there. So they tunneled up through the mountain in a series of kind of, again, spirals. I guess that's kind of the way of tunneling. And then they create these caverns where they chock full of explosives, and then they'd obviously light the fuse and run away and hope for the best. And they blew off at the top part of the Lagazoy Mountain, and you can see that part of the mountain is gone from this explosion that was felt many miles away in Trentino and Marmolada. One of the biggest explosions, even considering the explosions and the mining that was going on in the Brittany and Normandy fronts. Fascinating. Anyway, sorry. And trenches, and their trenches are littered everywhere. This is on the summit of the Hexenstein. Have I called it the Hexenstein? It's also called something else. Hexenstein and the... Oh, I can't remember. But basically, lots of these places have several names because, of course, they have German names from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they have Ladin names. Remember that kind of strange Romance language that I talked about? So they're Ladin names. And then when Mussolini came along in the Second World War, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about the Second World War too much. In the Second World War, Mussolini decided it was absolutely terrible that all these places, these Italian places, had German names. So he invented loads of new names in Italian that never existed before. So some of these maps have 3 names, often 2, sometimes 3, very rarely 1. And that's why it can be confusing to people driving around the place as well, because there are lots of places with 2 names, like Bolzano, Bolton, anyway. Okay, so the next slide shows some sentry points. This is on the Tre Cime. So those big iconic 3 mountains, the Cima Grande, Cima West, and Cima Piccolo. Those 3 iconic, I haven't actually put up a picture of them. It probably would have been quite useful to do that. But anyway, these are on the south side of the mountain, and there's lots of little tunnels that you can explore there when you come down from your climb, if you come down in time from your climb. And these are obviously some very old rickety wooden steps. I've put them in. In hindsight, I should have shown there's a little rickety bridge that you can do when you go up the Monte Cristallo, which is a 3,000 meter peak. And the actual description tells you to go over this rickety little bit of wood, and it's probably better not to. It's probably better to kind of like use the rock around it, because this rickety bit of wood, I mean, it's been there since the First World War. It's over 100 years, so I would perhaps be a bit suspicious of the fixed gear that's been there for 100 years, rotting away. Anyway, so that's the military history. Very, very interesting. And these military these military resupply lines, some of them have now been improved and turned into incredible modern day via ferratas. And this is in the Sexton Dolomites, which is deep in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They only speak German up there. And it's called the Strada delle Alpini. And it's absolutely stunning. So I'm going to press play. You can see my friend, hopefully. Hopefully you'll be able to see my friend walking along this ledge. So as I say, it's a sedimentary rock. So these ledges have formed naturally, and then basically the troops just kind of improved them, excavated them. He takes a little while initially. I think he's worried about banging his head, you know. Hopefully he's actually moving. Yeah. Yeah, oh, you can see him coming along. Gives you a sense of the scale, and it's this is the kind of terrain that you also see in the Brenta Dolomites. The Brenta Dolomites is very famous for its via ferrata. You can see, as I said previously, he's not using the cable, but you could use the cable if you wanted to. But it's about 1 meter wide, so if you're confident, you probably don't need it. You could use it as a handrail, but there's definitely sections. I think this section maybe he's thinking about clipping in, or maybe it's not. Anyway, it gives you a flavour of what the via ferratas are like, because above this, it's about 500 meters of vertical cliff, and the same below. Unfortunately, my video doesn't quite show that, but if you do a little bit of research online, you can see some of these stunning via ferratas. And although I am definitely much more of a climber than a via ferrata, I've tended, please, I hope nobody gets insulted by this, but I've tended to dismiss via ferratas by just going click, 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 click. I mean, because how hard is it really? Click, click. Oh, okay. Hopefully nobody's too offended by that. However, some of these via ferratas are actually much more than clip, clip, I warn you. And I actually really enjoy these ones in the Dolomites. I think it's the Western Alps ones, that, you know, the contrived ones, the ones that they kind of like just pick a bit of rock and they have to, these actually follow routes, and interesting routes. And along the way, you might learn a bit of history. So I think there's a lot more to these, and so I don't find these, I don't dismiss these as the clip clipping, but you might encounter a few clip clippers along the way. Okay, moving on to the next. So over the years, so I spent a period of about sort of between 5 and 10 years, I can't remember exactly how many, where I went to the Dolomites every summer, at least to do one route, or at least a week, sometimes for a couple of months. I even spent one summer doing quite a lot of work up at a refuge below Montagne, that big mountain that we saw in the first slide, because I had this kind of weird idea that maybe when I'm a bit older, I could be a mountain guard, a refuge guardian, you know, one of the hut guardians, until I realized that being a hut guardian requires being in one place all the time and sorting a lot of sweaty slippers and folding a lot of blankets and washing the toilets that everyone's used. And then I realized that it probably isn't for me, mainly because I think I have tendencies that folding everyone's blankets and sorting everyone's slippers into those little cubicles where they said 37, 38, well, they're never only 37s, but 40, 41, 42, I would get really angry with the people that didn't adhere to the rules. And I think I would have in me the tendencies to be that angry hut guardian that nobody wants to approach because they've just been a hut guardian too long, you know. So I thought better to nip that suggestion in the bud and just not go there. But I did actually spend quite a lot of time trying, you know, apprentice, but I wasn't even allowed to use the coffee machine on that hut, so clearly didn't get too far in my skill set. Anyway, after about 10 years, the book on the left that you see in this Instagram picture, Classic Climbs of the Dolomites, is the book that I bought on that first trip, the English book. And it was actually a really good thing because as English guidebooks go, it's pretty good. It's written by 2 Germans and translated into English by an American company, so it's probably why. But these 2 Germans, Annette Köhler and Köhler Memmel, they spent years climbing really good routes, researching, and they've put a whole selection of 94 routes in my edition of the book, which is edition 2, between grade 3, UIAA grade 3, and grade 7. And that gives a nice spread of routes, some really easy, some a bit harder. And they picked routes from all over the Dolomites. So there's some in the Brenta, there's some in the Pala di San Martino, there's some in the Trecime, there's some in the Sella Massif. some in Sassalunga. They've done a select guidebook, and over the years I used this to guide my own climbing and also to guide trips that I organised for work for students. And then I suddenly realised one I think it was a couple of years ago, I looked at this book and I went, oh, I've actually climbed more routes than remain in this book. So actually, why don't I try and complete the rest? Because actually, there hadn't been at that stage, there hadn't been any route in the book that I hadn't enjoyed. And it had actually encouraged me to explore other areas of the Dolomites, which perhaps I wouldn't have otherwise gone to. So I thought I can use this as a tool to, you know, fill in those missing gaps and really get to know them. So I spent the rest of that summer trying to do that. And by the end of the summer, which was 2018, I think I had 23, moved on, 23 climbs left to do. Let me just see. I wasn't following my notes, unfortunately. Yeah, so I had 23 routes left. And so I thought, okay, this is a reasonable proposition for next year. So that next year being 2019, I thought, okay, I see another little mini project coming on. I could climb 23 routes and finish the book. And at that stage, I thought it would be a really neat idea that if I saved the last one and then asked either Annette Köhler or Köhler Memmel to go and do the last one with me. I thought, well, that'd be a really nice thing to do. And fortunately, that summer, I met a friend of Annette Köhler's, and a guide, a German guide who I worked with a group over in Innsbruck. And she was, yeah, I'm sure Annette would do that. That would be brilliant. So I had this kind of concept. And in the autumn, I started telling people about my plan for the next year, which was to climb the rest of the routes in the classic Dolomites climb in summer of 2019. And I was climbing with a German fellow. Unfortunately, I've forgotten his name. We were cragging in Chamonix. And he rather kind of, he looked a little bit, so he said that, he looked a bit sort of peeved. He said, I have this book, but my book does not have 94 climbs. It has over 100 climbs. And initially I couldn't believe him that, I said, you've got the wrong book, mate. It can't be the same book. Unfortunately, that evening, because he had, well, he was German, obviously, so he had German tendencies, he very meticulously sent me a photograph of the book and a photograph of all of the other climbs, because I sent him a list. The index list of all of the climbs, and he sent me a photograph of all of the missing climbs. But there were 8 more climbs in his book than my book. And initially, I do that evening. I was like, oh, that's 30. Oh, that's 30. One more of the 32 climbs I've got to do. Oh no, okay, that might be a little bit more tricky. And I thought I had to manage this really. So I decided to turn this into something positive. I realized that I'd already done one of these climbs because I haven't just climbed from this book. I have actually done other things. And obviously I'm not so linear that I've stuck to this and nothing more. So I've got other guidebooks now and I've done lots of other different climbs. And I realized that in the course of my climbing, I had done one of his new list. And then I decided to call this the 7 routes from his book, the bonus climb. So in fact, I had 31 climbs to do in 2019. And I thought this was, I easily do 2019 summer. I'd set aside 2 months. I'd easily do 31 climbs. That wouldn't be a problem. So what I'd do with the rest of the time. And in the summer of 2018, I'd spent a lot of time without a climbing partner because, you know, people didn't have the time off that I did, and I couldn't find someone who wanted, you know, that I could meet up with. And so I bought another book to fill my time, which was these 3,000 meter peaks of the Dolomites. I told you there were 86 of them. And obviously some climbs lead to the summit of the 3,000 meter peaks. And I'd actually been up some of the 3,000 meter peaks anyway, because some beer-fraters go to the top. And I thought, oh, this would be another really good way of exploring the Dolomites, because I'd done this really nice mountain called Cristallo, which was a 3,000 meter peak, and I'd done it on my own, and it was scrambling, and it had that kind of rickety, rotten wooden was World War I bridge that I was telling you about that you just definitely don't cross. You just kind of creep around the side. And I thought, oh, again, this could expand my knowledge, and it'd be a really good thing to do. So why don't I do both? Why don't I actually climb these 31 peaks, the 31 routes, and the 86, and you know, the days that I don't have a climbing partner, I'll just climb the 86 3,000 meter peaks, and I'll also do my summer work as well. And as I'm saying this, and we had a rehearsal a few days ago, and I said the same thing, and as I'm vocalizing this, I realize what a utterly stupid and overly ambitious goal this was. And you can see my kind of rather naive message in the Instagram post. Yeah, I've got a new project. Obviously, it was totally unrealistic. And I should have just stuck with the 31 climbs, which were going to be hard enough anyway, because some of them aren't just short routes. Some of them are on the south face of the Monoliths. So you need a little bit of time to walk to the hut, and you need to recover after doing a 28 pitch route. So it was a bit unrealistic. And through the course of 2019, when I went to do all these climbs, I did very soon realize that I didn't want to create a goal or a project that was, you know, a rod to beat myself with. You know, I wanted to actually enjoy it. So I kind of put the green book on the right hand side. I put that to one side. I did some of them, and I think I'll stick with it. And over the years in the future, I'll go back and, you know, just over the years, next 10, 15 years, I'll keep chipping away. And because some of the climbs, some of the mountains in that book are really shitty rock. So as you've seen that photo at the start, that was one of these in the 3,000 meter peaks, and it's not the worst. So although I actually quite like the care and attention that's required to focus on that kind of terrain, I don't want to do it all the time. So I'm going to put that book to one side. And so anyway, I had 31 climbs left. And what I discovered, I kind of knew this anyway, is that if you've got a project and 31 climbs, people are you've got a goal, people are much more likely to take time off work or to set time aside to help you with a project than if you just go, I'm going climbing. Would you like to come climbing with me? If you can go, I've only got 12 routes to do, and you could help me chip two of them off. It's amazing. It's amazing how people really want to buy into that. So it was actually a really good mechanism for me to get friends and new climbing partners to come and join me and share this project. So that was the goal. The previous year I'd done this big Norway journey on my own for 82 days. Kind of wanted a summer of doing something good, but shared with friends. And thankfully, this mechanism of enticing them in, you can help me succeed, it really did work. So anyway, now that we've been a long time on that, so the Dolomites, with all these routes that we needed to do, or I needed to do, or wanted to do, the Dolomites has some very, very special technical skills that you need. Of course, you need them elsewhere in the Alps, yes, but they're kind of really heightened here. So one thing that's really important to be aware of in the Dolomites is the weather, particularly in the summer. Obviously, it can get very hot, and the thunderstorms there can be massive. And so you can get into this cycle of weather where you really have to keep an eye on what percentage risk there is of they call it a phenomenon, of a thunderstorm. And I was advised by a French guide who I've climbed with down there quite a lot, that if he sees 40% chance of thunderstorms or above, he doesn't step onto a medium to big route. He just does something easy and escapable, and he starts early. And I think he's right. 40% quite high risk, really, and something is probably going to happen. If it's 30%, he kind of chances it with moderate stuff. 20%, you can do a long route so long as you start early and you're fast and efficient. But if you're not fast and efficient, if you think you're going to take your time, or if you've got a very long route and a complicated descent, you really need a forecast where it says no chance of thunderstorms. And those days really don't happen that often in the Dolomites. So when they do, when you see that in the forecast, I've got to pull out the stops on this day. I've got to go big, because you might only get a handful of those kind of days in the summer, because these monstrous thunder clouds are basically racing you up the route, and there's a clock ticking. So you've got to be efficient. And if you're not efficient, then the picture on the right shows you what you might have to deal with, which really isn't very pleasant. So there are big penalties for being slow, inefficient, or picking the wrong route. So on those days when the risk of thunder is bigger, you want to make sure that your descents are not complicated either. Either abseil descents or mountaineering descents requiring some kind of degree of commitment. You want a fast walk-off. Okay. So it's also marked by some really complicated and committing terrain, exposed ledges, and committing abseils, and sometimes committing multi-pitch abseils. So it's really important that you do your research on the route, not just on the route itself, but the descent, and really understand and get your head into the descent. So whether the descent is describing looking out or looking in, and what you can expect to find in terms of fixed gear and otherwise. And the Austrian guide ski, the Austrians, the Germans, the Swiss, the French, and the Italians, who have actually several different guide schemes. They have one in all the autonomous regions, so Val d'Aosta, Südtirol, and the other countries. Anyway, they all do part of their training and assessment in the Dolomites for the very reason that this complicated committing terrain demands good mountaineering skills. And so it's an excellent learning ground for good mountaineering skills. I personally think it would be great if the British Guide Scheme did some of its training or assessment there, because when I was an aspirant and I did my exam, I did a limestone route on one of my exam days with another aspirant, and I remember being quite surprised at how difficult the route finding he found. He found the route finding on this limestone ridge very difficult. And to me, I didn't think it was particularly difficult. And I think the only reason that we had that difference is because I've done a lot more mountaineering down here in the Dolomites. It's an excellent proving ground to finding the easy passage, to looking at a place and thinking what will go and what won't, and having developing that mountain sense. Anyway, so. It's also marked by some incredibly wild mountains. This is that famous montagne that I was talking about right at the start in the San Locano Valley in the Pala di San Martino. The Pala di San Martino is one of the southernmost blocks of coral reef mountains, and it's very, very wild down there. And actually, it's rare to see other climbers on the routes that you're doing. They're very long lines. So this ridge that you can see that I'm pointing out here, this is 1,500 meters long. Okay, so you've got to be efficient. You've got to move. Fortunately, it's a grade UIAA 5+ is the maximum, and most of the climbing starts from about mid-height onwards. Some people choose to bivouac. There's a little bivouac ledge, but there's no water there, so take your pick. And this lower third is mostly sort of grade 3, grade 4 shrub pulling. So you have to get You have to get really good at climbing on rock and pulling up shrubs, because you can see it's a little bit vegetated down there, yeah? Okay, but it's a very, very good route. So very long lines and isolated summits. This picture down on the right, that's the summit of Montagne. And just, so if you climb this big 1,500 meter route, nice summit, there's a little via ferrata that descends down on this side, via ferrata to this notch here. And then just below this notch, there's a bivouac hut that you can stay the night. So if you're a fast and efficient team, you don't have to stay on the halfway ledge with no water. You could actually go up all the way and stay in this nice, very nice, comfortable bivouac hut. And if you're really fast, then just below is about an hour's descent to the refuge Scarpa Gurkien, which is the refuge that I actually folded a lot of blankets and sorted a lot of plastic plugs for a wee while before I realized that wasn't my vocational calling. And there are some incredibly big faces and exposed traverses. This is my guiding, one of my guiding friends, a French guide, who I talked about earlier, who has an extensive knowledge of the Dolomites. And he's on a climb called Big Micheluzzi. So this is the meat of the climb, if you like, which is about 3 pitches of grade 6 traversing. And it's fantastic. I mean, look at the stunning view. The mountain that you can see in the background there is the Pordoi Spitz. There's actually a cable car that goes from here. You can't see it, but it goes to the summit here, from here to here. Yeah. So, but there are lots of climbs, really long climbs that go up this face to the midway left, and then you can escape this way if you want to, or you can continue and then take the cable car down. But they're so long that you're probably not going to get the cable car down. So you can stay in the hut up here instead. And you can see these black streaks here. This is all sort of water worn. So wherever you see the black, it's a bit of a warning that in bad weather, that's probably where the waterfalls fall, yeah? And there's one of the book climbs in the book is absolutely fantastic, and it's maximum 4+, really, but a lot of 4+. UIA 4+. It goes up and this grey rock, skis stays to the right of this black bit, and then at this point here it dives into the black bit, and you have to cross, and it says this is best done several days after after rainfall. You know, leave it a good dry settled spot. And whenever it says that in the book, it really does mean that. Yeah, so I can see some nodding faces. So if it says leave it after rainfall, don't say, oh, it's been dry for a morning, it'll be fine. Because I climbed this a week after rainfall and there was still water and I was still totally drenched on my arms on this. You can still climb because the holds are good and it's very atmospheric, but it's known for having to cross through this waterfall section. There's a sister route, there's another route that's slightly harder up here that's called Via Niagara. I haven't done that, but I'm told it's quite good. But I suggest that you might want to leave that for dry settled conditions as well. And then the fantastic continuation up here. So there's some really, really big faces with some iconic climbs. Yeah, this Piz Travazas here that you can see, actually you can climb in spring, and I climbed it in summer obviously, but you can ski to the base, leave your skis at the base, climb the route, wrap the route or wrap another route nearby, and then take your skis and ski off. I don't particularly, because there's a big kind of slopey ledge up here that I imagine must hold some snow. I didn't particularly want to do that, but I'm told by local guiding friends that it's a popular way of doing it. And I've thrown this one in because some of our team will recognise this. This is the Road de Vale above Passo Compolongo, and there's actually two routes in the book here. One that goes up this really rather shitty rock that I never want to repeat again, and then up a beautiful climb here called the Dibona route, and that's the picture that you see on the right hand side. And then there's the Eisenstecken route, which takes this big dihedral here and then heads up here. And this I actually did with two of the ladies they're staring me in the background, yeah. And it was an incredible day. But this is a really beautiful shield-like mountain, and it's got incredibly easy access because there's a little cable car up here to a hut, and then it's only about 30-40 minutes walk to the base. So you've got these big walls. My fingers are a little bit sweaty from today. I think that's what's going on. So you've got these big walls, but really easy access sometimes. Not everything has easy access, but you definitely can. And here the descent is really simple as well. There's a via ferrata that comes down here. We saw some kids going up there, didn't we? Into the teeth of a thunderstorm. Some 4-year-old being dragged up there by their parents into a thunderstorm. Okay, so big walls, easy access, and then there's also some very unique climbs. This is on the Neunerspitze in the Fannes-Sennes National Park, and this is really unique because it's limestone slab climbing. You don't really find this in the Dolomites so much, but the way that the mountains have formed mean that those bedding planes have been tilted upwards, and you've got this beautiful 5-6 pitch climb where it's just friction padding. So if you can make one move, you can make them all, and it's grade 5, UIA grade 5, which is probably bottom end VS. So it's not hard, but there isn't much gear. There's the pegs that Messner and put up, the original pegs, and then there's a few bolts that people put on the belay for a little bit of extra security, but that's it. So it really is, I was a little bit intimidated before I went to do this because although it's only grade 5, I don't really like slab climbing, and I don't really like bold climbing. I actually like having protection. So I was a little bit concerned, but it was quite addictive because you kind of just have to park your brain in neutral and just keep going. And you have this kind of neutral mindset where you're not really thinking about anything. You're just kind of moving and, oh, look at this. And I actually was a bit sad when we climbed it afterwards because the climbing is actually quite addictive, probably because it's nowhere desperately difficult. I think if you want something like that and you couldn't make the move, it would just be absolutely living end. So this is a nice one to do, and I did it with a former student and his girlfriend here, and it was a lovely day out, really nice. So, and it was a bold lead at the time. And why I put climbing history there is because this is a Messner route, and Messner's put up an immense amount of routes in the Dolomites. And before he lost his toes on Nanga Parbat, I think he lost 8 of them, he was actually a cutting edge rock climber. He was much more known for his rock climbing than his Himalayan ascents. Obviously, all that changed when he lost his toes, because slab climbing requires your toes. So he wasn't quite at the cutting edge anymore. He still climbed pretty damn hard, but he was utterly sort of inspirational beforehand. And some of the things that he has done in the Dolomites, I mean, he put this route up. He put there's another route that I'll talk about later on, that Peter Keeley knows, that it's on the south face of the Marmolada. There's a climb called the Vinatsa Messner, and it used to be called the Vinatsa, but most people now climb the direct finish, which Messner climbed. And he climbed solo, 400, 500 meters of slab, but not like easy slab, hard slab, and up to grade 6+. And he soloed it as a new route, and now it's a classic climb, and it's one of the routes in the book, the Vinatsa Messner route on the south face of the Marmolada. So there's some fantastic history there. He's also renowned for, there's a Messner slab route on the Sas de la Cruz, which was one of the bonus climbs that I had to do. Fortunately, I didn't have to do the Messner route. I had to do something considerably easier, because that slab, the slab move that he did for many years wasn't repeated, and people didn't actually believe that he could have done it. They thought it was kind of, he somehow, well, I hate to use the word lie, but they just didn't believe him. And then finally, I think it took about 15 years, and someone did it and realized, oh no, this maybe actually did climb this. And if he did, then boy, was he really firing on 15 cylinders at the time. So he's put some iconic, and the climbing history. There are names there that you will definitely have heard. Dulfer, Camici, Proust, Ratti, Cassin, Innerkoffler, Castiglione, Eisenstecken, Debona, all of these names put routes up all over the Dolomites, and then went into the rest of the Alps and put climbs up all over the Alps. So it's an inspiring climbing history as well. So these pictures are the south face of the Marmolada. It's about a kilometre-long cliff and up to about 900 meters climbing, south facing, and it's limestone slab climbing. So the nature of the climbing here is slightly different to what you find elsewhere, but it really is very good. Now, there are 3 climbs in the book that I wanted to do. The classic Thomas and Bettenberg, it's a series of chimneys at about grade 4+. On the far, as you're looking at it from the south, looking at the south face from the south, it's on the far left-hand side. And that was the first climb that was put up on this. It's almost a 1,000-meter face, it's 900 meters. And one of the interesting parts of the history there, it was put up in 1901 by Beatrice Thomason and her 2 guides. And she climbed into the teeth of the storm. It was the first time that a route had been opened on the face, and it was opened by a woman and her 2, female climber and her 2 guides. So the history there is very interesting. And so that's the grade 4 classic route up the left-hand side. Then there's this Vinatsa Messner route that I was talking about. But the Vinatsa has some grade 6+ climbing on it, very beautiful. And then the Messner quests up across these slabs with, again, a hard pitch of 6 that makes you glad you've got protection, although Messner soloed it, as I said. And then the final one in the classic climbs book is this is the Don Quixote 700 meters grade, and it's got 2 pictures of about grade 6+, high up on the route. The rest is considerably easier, and this is considered one of the more accessible, easy classics of the south face of the Marmolada. And if I'm really honest, I enjoyed the day. I really enjoyed the day. I was with 2 very good friends of mine, but I don't think the climbing on it is particularly special. There are some nice pitches, and it's an easy intro, but the Vinatsa Messner is definitely much better, and there are much better routes on the mountain than this one. But it's still nice. It gives an easy access, and it's nice to be up there in such inspiring terrain. And so to draw this generally to a conclusion, I hope I've given you a flavour of why I think the Dolomites is such a special place, and some of the climbs that are available there. Obviously, it'd be impossible for me to talk about all of the different climbs, but one of the other aspects of this place that is so special to me is that I've done all of these climbs with students or clients who are also friends, or with climbing friends who I from Chamonix and from elsewhere. And as I said here, you know, either with friends or with clients who've become friends. This first picture on the left is Julia Trugaskis Allen, who runs Tracks and Trails. And the last couple of years, we've done a week down there together. And it's been really quite nice to have a sort of girls week on a regular basis. And she's very kindly allowed me to direct the route choice, which is always very handy because she knew that I had this project. However, when my project comes to a close, she probably won't be so, won't allow me to pick all of the routes anymore. And this picture on the right is a former client of mine, Leah, when she was 15. She's now well into her medical studies at university. But we had 5 days climbing together with her and her best mate. They were good gym climbers. They'd done a lot of indoor sport climbing, but they hadn't really done that much outside. And the year previous, she climbed the Gran Paradiso with me, and then decided that she wanted to do a week's trad climbing, because effectively the climbing in the Dolomites is trad. Even though you'll find fixed gear pegs, you have to be able to place your own equipment. It is not, there are sport climbs, but all of the climbs that I've been talking about are not sport climbs. You'll find fixed gear that you can back up then. And she spent 4 or 5 days with me, and we ticked off some really nice routes, and you can see how comfortable and at ease she is. So she was able to transfer those skills from indoor sport climbing to the outdoor world very, very easily. So drawing that together, we go back to this Agordino heart, because what my time in the Dolomites has shown me is that even in this one area of the European Massif, the European Alps, there is a lifetime of adventures in this one area. And every single route that I've done, pretty much, I've heard about another one just to the side or on the opposite mountain, and I've got the topo for it, and it looks stunning, or I've had a recommendation. Oh, you did that one. Oh, well, why did you do that one? That's not very good. You should do these, you know. So my list now is no shorter than it was when it started. Unfortunately, the pressure's a little bit less because I do feel I know the area now, and I'm not in any hurry to do them. But what I should say is that I probably should let you know that at the end of that summer, I didn't complete my project. So you might be wondering how many were left. Well, I tried very hard, and I called it a day, and I went back to Chamonix with 2 remaining. And then I saw an opportunity for maybe get both of them done, and I drove like a mad thing with some friends back to the Brenta Dolomites to try and do these 2. And we did manage to do one. We managed to do the Via della Soddisfazione on the Cima d'Ambies, very, very beautiful mountain. But the next day, unfortunately, the storm that was brewing came in early and laid down quite a lot of relatively early season snow. So by the end of September, the other route that I wanted to do, the last one in this entire list, which is the northeast face of northeast face of Brenta Alta and the De Tassis route, which was put up by Bruno De Tassis. That one still remains, and it's quite a long route on a northeast face of a mountain that is 2,996 meters. So almost 3,000, but not quite. But because it's almost 3,000, it holds the snow. And so really, I had to kind of admit to myself that it wasn't going to happen that year. So now I have one climb in the book left to do. And fortunately, I have a climbing partner who's very keen and very motivated. And we've set aside 10 days. So in that 10 days this summer, hopefully I'll manage to get that one route done. And at the end of the summer, last summer, I was a little bit disappointed until a friend pointed out to me that actually finishing with one climb left to do in the book, because of course I obviously have other climbs that I'd like to do, finishing with one climb left to do in the book is actually kind of a nice way of doing, because I am still motivated for this next year. Although in these 10 days, I've told my friend, so long as we just do that one route, I'm happy, you know, so that I am a bit goal focused. But anyway, so hopefully in August, one of those days will be settled enough, because you need a good settled day for that 3,000 meter peak, I will manage to get it done. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I was told, oh, sorry, I did forget. I was told that I needed to do some top tips for the Dolomites at the end to round this off, because I hadn't put top tips in the Dolomites, because I guess you've kind of like heard some of my my top tips along the way. And the first thing is, don't be put off if you don't get it right the first time. So people have gone to the Dolomites, had a bad experience, and then written it off and goes, oh, the Dolomites is shit. Oh, the Dolomites is all loose rock. Oh, I don't see what the fuss is about. And they never go back. And they've just had a bad experience, because it is incredible. And so don't let that first bad experience put you off. You do need to, it takes time to find where those good climbs are. But once you have one good experience, you've unlocked it, and you know there are good climbs there. You just have to expand your knowledge a little bit. So do your research, and that's guidebooks and internet. Things are much, much better now than they were 10, 15 years ago. The guidebooks are getting better, although some guidebooks aren't, so we'll put the rock facts to one side. But there are lots of other guidebooks, and there's an awful lot of information on the internet. So maybe you have to do a little bit of research, and then once you've got that research, see whether you know someone that could tell you whether the topos that you found fit with what you got. And then after you've got a bit more experience, you'll begin to trust the people that make the topos. So yeah, just do your research and expand your knowledge. The other thing is being efficient. So I like safe climbing. However, in the Dolomites, if you are too safe, you will be slow and you will be unsafe. So it's a balance. You have to know when to place gear to protect yourself, but you also have to be prepared to run it out. And run it out when the consequences are actually quite serious. So I have on numerous times been well above my gear that if a hold broke, the consequences would be serious. But you are continually evaluating the terrain and your skills, and you climb cautiously. So I'm not climbing like I'm in an indoor gym, pulling. I'm climbing knowing that, although I've said that the rock is very solid on all these climbs, that it might not be. Yeah. So, and you have to be prepared to climb well above your gear to be efficient on some of the routes. And if you're not, maybe that you might find that the Dolomites isn't for you, or you might want to stick to easier routes than is your normal UK grade. And you'll still have good fun, because even the easy routes in the Dolomites are incredible. Okay. But you do need to be efficient, and you do need to move because of those thunderstorms. There's nothing worse than being in a waterfall. So fixed gear, there's a lot of fixed gear, lots of pegs, and you can use them, and they're very useful because they're unidirectional anchors if they're placed well. So test them and back them up. And always be suspicious of in situ slings. You know, slings are much worse than rope anchors. They don't hold their strength any length of time. Now, I have never had to hammer a peg in the Dolomites in all my experience, but I've been sticking to the more regular run-of-the-mill routes. From this point onwards, I'll probably start to do some more esoteric routes, because I've done quite a lot of the kind of like non-esoteric ones, and I'm going to start taking a hammer and some pegs with me, particularly so that I can test and back up the abseil anchors. However, for most of the routes, you don't need to do that. Most of the ones in this classic climb book, because they're regularly done, and the anchors are good. And if you're en route, it's okay. Obviously, if you're off route, then you might need a hammer and some pegs. Start early. There is no point in starting late ever in the Dolomites. Even if it says it's only 10% chance of thunderstorms, don't take the chance. I had a message from a guiding friend of mine. I left last summer. I did some climbing in the Dolomites, then I went back to work in Innsbruck for a while, and a guiding friend of mine from Chamonix came across with his girlfriend, sent me some messages saying, oh, this place is awesome, I think I can move here, this is great. Oh, but the thunderstorms, we had this beautiful day and we set off to climb on the Cinque Torre at 4 p.m. And as soon as I read this message, I was like, why did you do that? Oh, it was good weather at 4 p.m. And lo and behold, an hour later, he was absolutely piss wet through from the thunderstorm that had rolled in from down the valley that he hadn't seen coming, and had a bad experience in the Dolomites. Don't start climbing at 4 p.m. and expect to be dry at the end of it, unless it says 0% chance of rainfall. And use the huts to your advantage. The huts are fantastic and they're actually relatively cheap. They do not cost the same as the French huts or the Swiss huts. They are much, much cheaper, and they give discounts to big discounts to young people. And the food is cheap and it's good. And the coffee isn't €3.50. You can have a €1.50 cappuccino in a refuge and then a pasta meal for like €7 or €8. So use the huts to your advantage. They're not like the French and Swiss ones. And finally, learn to climb chimneys. If you can't climb chimneys, most climbs at some stage will have a chimney climb in it, yeah? So you need to have those skills. And if you don't have those skills and you're a nice face climber and you get to the chimney, you're gonna find it desperate and have a bad experience. So learn to climb and love chimneys. And that's the end of my top tips. Hey.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tania. That was amazing. There's so much great information in there, and I think you've really, really inspired a lot of people. And you know, Chris has put in the chat when you were talking about the building of the mountains that her mind has been blown. So yeah, well done for doing that for a Thursday evening. So thank you so much for talking for us. We really appreciate all the time and effort that you put in to this presentation, and spending, you know, all this time with us. So thank you.
I'm hoping that there's someone out there that liked the military history bit.
I'm sure there is.
Winner. If there isn't.
Yeah, that was so great. And I think it's such a big part.
That was so great.
So great. No, because I think when you go out there, you can't not be kind of, you know,
you have to be
fascinated or appalled by what is there, because it's just in your face, isn't it? Whatever you do on the Via Ferrata or the climbs or just driving around. So yeah, really great to know, and I think lots of people have learned lots, so thank you. So I've got just a few questions. So if you've got some questions for Tania, you can either put them in the chat on Zoom and then I will ask them, or if you're watching with us on Facebook Live, you can shove them in the comments and then someone will let me know them and we can ask. Or if you'd like to come and show us your lovely faces, then you can ask your question to Tania in person by going down to the bottom where it says participants, and there's a little thing that says raise your hand, and then we can come to you. So do put any questions in case you've got them. Just to start us off, I've got a couple of questions, Tania, for you. You mentioned about the UIAA grades. Are you able to give comparison, because that might be new to some people? I know we use them in the Alps, but for pure rock, sometimes it's a bit different.
Fortunately, Jenny, you gave me advance warning of this one, so fortunately I can respond, because I actually haven't climbed in the UK for quite a long time now, so I'm much more happy with either American grades or UIAA grades. But I've got this other grade 3 is about sort of diff, V-diff. Okay, so it's pretty easy, hopefully. Yeah. 5 is where we started getting into the bottom end of VS. Yeah. And then 5 plus 6 minus, we're looking at HVS. And then 6 minus up to 6 plus, we're looking at E1. However, I would use that with a degree of caution, because they are long pitches and the exposure is big, and in my experience the grading doesn't seem to quite fit as comfortably as you might expect, particularly at the bottom end of the grades, but it starts to feel a bit more realistic when you're getting onto grade 6 terrain. It starts to hold it a bit better. It feels woolly lower down, and then it feels a bit more exact when you get into 6. You kind of, oh yeah, that felt like a HVS, that felt like an E1. I'm going to do 10 pictures of it, that sort of thing. However, I'm going to talk about chimneys because a grade 3 chimney, everyone should be able to do, because it's littered with holes. Yeah, it's like if you've got hands and feet, you should be able to get up a grade 3 chimney. A grade 4 chimney, you actually have to do a bit bridging, and you have to look for the holes, but the holes will be there. A grade 5 chimney will require some chimney climbing skills, such as smearing, back and footing, wriggling, and other things like that. Okay? And if it's got a plus, then it probably means there's a strenuous move somewhere, or an exposed move that you might not like if that's your maximum grade. It's going to be challenging for that grade. Yeah. So if you are a grade 5 climber, 5 climber, and it's a 5+ chimney, there's going to be a tough bit that might involve a bit of wriggling or a bit of awkwardness. Yeah. And then if you're into, I would say 5, yeah, if you don't like chimneys, stay away from the 5+ chimneys. But if you like chimneys, then 5+ is fine. But then 6- chimneys, they're going to be pretty meaty. Okay. Okay. So good.
Great.
Chimneys.
Chimneys, yeah, great. Chimneys graded.
Like the Philip Flam route, which is mostly chimneys at 6-. Maybe Katie Keeley's done that one. I don't know.
It's not for me. I'm not. Great. So I think because quite often in guidebooks it kind of gives you those grade comparisons, doesn't it? And I know I've definitely gone there and been like, right, I'm going to go a grade below my trad climbing in the UK, and still been kind of, oh my god, what is this? Yes, bit of caution.
She said, no way, I hate chimneys.
Yeah,
I've got the perfect route for you then, Katie. There's a 1,600-meter Yori chimney route, 5+, 1,600 meters of chimneying on Montagne, to the left of the. Still looking for someone to climb it.
I think Katie's busy that day. Yeah.
What do you mean that day? That days.
Oh, God.
Days.
Yeah, she's very busy. I've got someone asking. That's a nightmare. Moving on from the chimneys, please. We've got someone asking about scrambling routes in the Dolomites. Are there any, and do you have any favourites?
Yeah, so in that book, the 3,000 meters peaks of the Dolomites, there aren't any climbing routes in that book. Not the classic climbs book, the 3,000 meter peaks. There are basically, they've picked scrambling or via ferrata routes to get to the summit of all of these 3,000 meter mountains. And some of those, I haven't done all of them. I've done about 30 of the peaks now. And some of them are fantastic. But some of them have interesting rock. Yes. So if you want scrambling on solid rock, then you have to read the text very carefully to make sure that that's what you're going to get. Because there are some mountains that required scrambling on less than solid rock, that Weetabix mountain. Yeah. One I really liked is Cristallo, Monte Cristallo, which is above the Cortina. And that's the one that has the rotten wooden World War I bridge. But you don't have to use that. You can go around on solid rock, yeah? Now, the nature of the Dolomite rock is also, you should be aware, is that when there are ledges, there is going to be some debris on the ledges, the loose rock, you know? But I'm not, when I talk about the rock being solid generally, I'm putting to one side that there might be pebbles and stones on the ledges that have fallen off, you know, that I'm not counting that as loose. That, to me, that's not loose rock. That's stuff you have to deal with. Loose rock is when you take a handhold and it comes off, yeah? Or when the bit that you're climbing falls away, like in the Western Alps these days, yeah? So we don't have that, but the debris on the ledges, you have to get used to on the scrambling routes, yeah? Because you have to move around it, yeah? But that's easily done. It's like moving around gravel. Yes, Cristallo, very nice.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that. That's great. So last question, if someone was going to the Dolomites for the first time, where would you get them to stay? And what kind of things would you recommend them doing?
So there's sort of two main bases of the Dolomites. Well, there's more than that, but as a starter, the more popular areas of the Dolomites are the northern section. So probably to get more used to routes and do routes that have seen more traffic. So there's more evidence of people having passed. So that helps you initially. So others stay away from the wild southern Dolomites. Either go to Canazite or Cortina. Cortina is a great base. There's lots of fantastic rock climbing around there. Some of you may have heard of the Cinque Torre, which is a small micro cragging venue, which is very accessible from Cortina, that gets you used to some of the fixed gear, the rock type, and some of the mountaineering style descent that you might require, but on a very small scale. And then the Tofano de Roses has some fantastic accessible routes, and there are via ferratas and scrambling routes based around there as well.
Great, thank you. Some top tips there. And of course,
fortunately, that's where the meet is going to be. So.
I was going to say that. Oh. Strangely enough, that is where we're going. Yeah. So yeah, like Louise said at the beginning, we should have been there this September, but because of everything that's going on, we've decided to chill out a bit and go there next September. So if this has whetted your appetite, which I'm sure it has, for climbing the Dolomites, do join us and come along and have a wonderful time with us in Cortina next September. So thank you so much, Tania. Really appreciate your time, and as always, you're so inspiring and enthusiastic. So thank you. We usually say what's next. This is the end of our weekly Alpine Stories, and because it's been a bit of a full-time job for Lizzie, and it's been fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much, Lizzie. This wouldn't have been the same without your amazing skills.
I don't think it would have happened, actually.
No, I would have just been me being like, hello everyone, being very unprofessional. So thank you. We're going to continue with our kind of Alpine talks, but on a monthly basis. And on our Facebook group for our community, I put up a little poll last week about what you'd like to see, because this is your community, your club. And so if you'd like to give us any feedback, we'd absolutely love it, because this was just us kind of being like, oh my God, lockdown, what are we going to do? We'd love to hear more from our members, from more female alpinists, and anything like that. So do let us know what you want to see. All of our previous Alpine stories from the last 10 weeks are up on the website, as well as some really cool articles. And you can also read about Katie Keeley's ascent of the Vinazza Messna on the side face of the Marmolada on there as well. So check that out if you'd like to see her amazing Bivy ledge photos. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us over this time. It's been really difficult for everyone, but it's been lovely having these Thursday evenings to kind of ground us. So thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to the wonderful Lizzie.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, Tania, such a great talk. Even better the second time around. Even more information. So thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining in on Facebook and here on Zoom, supporting the club this whole time. If you're new to us, then join the newsletter through the website. And oh gosh, I'm hearing an echo. And follow us on Instagram for all the latest news. Hopefully we might be able to do some UK skills meets or local skills meets in different places, but that's going to happen as and when it's appropriate. So just stay in touch, like get involved with the newsletters and with us on social media. But also you've spent a little bit of time with Tania tonight. I've been lucky enough to be up on the mountain with her along with Louise last summer in the Dolomites. And I have to say the difference between being in the Dolomites on my own and being in the Dolomites with Tania is like completely different. She's absolutely just a fantastic person, which I'm sure you can tell, and just an incredible guide. So if you are interested in getting in touch with her and hiring her for her services, she is based in Sardinia at the moment. So there's a bit of a poster up here. There's a lot of things, lots of adventures to have there. Check out her website as well, classicclimbs.com. I know that there's a wine and climb setup going on soon, which should be really good fun, and I would really like to join. So yeah, definitely get in touch with her. Here's her information. Check out the website, etc. And just to say, it's been an amazing 10 weeks, guys. Thank you so much. And keep climbing, stay in touch, and stay safe. Bye, everybody.